practice your pitch here at LitArts RI. I'm Jody Vinson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the program director here. And I also want to introduce our program coordinator at the back, Susanna Morse. LitArts RI is a nonprofit serving writers in Rhode Island through community events, workshops, writing groups, professional development events like this one, and shared creative workspace. We are recording the first portion of today's event for those who can't be here, so just be aware of that during the Q&A. And we might take a few photos for social media. If you don't want to be in them, just let myself or Susanna know. Later we'll make sure you're not in them on social. Thanks for being here. We're gathered here today on the ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Nation, who had their lands stolen through settler colonial violence. We recognize their continued presence as a sovereign nation and millennia-long steward of this land, as well as the historical tribal presence of the Nipmuc, Wampanoag, and Neantic peoples. We honor their stories and the vibrant contributions of indigenous people who live, work, and create in Rhode Island today. We also just want to acknowledge this is a difficult time for many writers in our community and for arts organizations in general. We're very fortunate to have secured funding from Providence Arts, Culture, and Tourism, as well as the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts that has made this program possible. And we'd like to thank them for continuing to support the arts in our city and state. We are committed to supporting writers through difficult times, and in particular with programs like this one that help open access to the publishing process and build local community support and connections. If you're interested in learning more about the organization, just connect with Susanna or I after the event. You can sign up for our newsletter, kind of lurk on social media at LitArts RI. Check out our upcoming programming events. We've got some great fall workshops and a really cool writer's block party coming up in October. The flyers are over here to the left of reception. And if you're interested in learning more about how you can help ensure that this programming continues in a way that's accessible to everyone, you can speak with our executive director, Christina Bevilacqua. She couldn't be here today, but we do have her contact information. So we have some really wonderful expert guides with us here today. I'm going to be introducing our guest speaker, literary agent Anjali Singh, who's joining us from New York in just a moment. Anjali will be offering an introduction to the agent process and advice on crafting your book pitch. Then we'll do a short Q&A, and you'll have an hour in the space to craft your book pitch. During that hour, 6 local authors will be available for you to consult one-on-one about your pitch. I'll introduce them in a bit, but Hannah Chung, Kathy G. Johnson, Lucas Mann, Riss and Nielsen, Sarah Shukla, and Jacinda Townsend are here to provide feedback in the meeting rooms down this hallway to the right. Then around 2:45 or so, we'll circle back up. You can choose to submit the pitch that you've written to this golden jar on the other side of the speaker. And then we're going to ask Anjali to respond with some in-the-moment feedback that we can all learn from. So that's kind of the structure for today's event. Also, if you are a writer of color, today's BIPOC Coffee Hour and Write-In is still happening at 4 p.m. today in the space. And Anjali is sticking around to answer your questions during that first hour. So any questions on the format so far? Okay. I'm going to introduce our speaker. Thanks again for being here. Anjali Singh founded her agency in 2024. Previously an agent at Ayesha Pand Literary, she has also worked as an acquiring editor at Vintage Books, Houghton Mifflin Harcourt, Simon & Schuster, and as editorial director at Other Press. She has always been drawn to the thrill of discovering new writers, and among the literary novelists whose careers she has helped launch are Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Samantha Hunt, Salim Haddad, and Nawaz Ahmed. She focuses on literary fiction, memoir, and narrative nonfiction. Please join me in welcoming Anjali. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, I'm Anjali. Thank you everyone for turning out on such a beautiful day to sit inside and listen to me talk. And I wanted to thank Jody and Susanna, Rhode Island Literary Arts, for hosting me. I am technically from New York. I have to travel from New York, but I went to Brown, and my mom lives in Westerly, Rhode Island, so I have Rhode Island has a very special place in my heart, so I was excited to have a reason to come. I usually do a little bit of a career an overview of my career, but scouting American books for foreign publishers when I first graduated, a couple years after I graduated from college, and then had various editorial jobs, all of which led me to being an agent 10 years ago. And Jody said I should really start with kind of an intro to what is a literary agent, what do we do, how do you know you need one, when do you need one, and I think, well, so I'll start there. So an agent really is an author's advocate. I see my role as working for my authors, and in fact, I am paid by my authors. Agents make our living by taking 15% of everything our authors do. And it's important information because there's both, for me and many agents, a sense of I am taking on work that feels meaningful to me, that I want to see in the world, but also there's always a little bit of risk. We do a lot of work on spec. I can work with an author for many years and never sell their book or sell their book for a really small advance, and I don't make, money that sort of justifies the hours of investment. So for me, the litmus test really has to be, do I want to see this in the world? And do I have the capacity to take this on, because I'm always juggling what I'm doing, and I also have to make enough money to take care of my family. So there's like a mission piece, but then there's also a financial piece. And I want to explain that because a lot of times a book can be really, really good. It can be a beautiful book, and I get a great query letter and I don't respond. Partly because 98% of my time at this point, 10 years in, is really managing the clients that I already represent. That's my highest priority because you have made me money. I work for you. When things come up in service of your projects, that's where I put my time and energy, and then queries are kind of down here at, if I get time, I might take a look. But I don't have an actual responsibility. We're not in a relationship yet, but it feels terrible because I get a lot of queries that I never respond to. And I think another thing I wanted to unpack about that is you can write a perfect book that's perfect for what it is and still not get a response from an agent. My job is not to evaluate the literary merits of your book or tell you whether or not it's good. Really my job is to sort of mediate the marketplace, explain the marketplace, and put books out into the marketplace. That's the part of the job that I don't love that is actually what it boils down to. Can I sell this? But I think it's really important to explain that there's a real difference between what I can sell, what the market will pay for, or at least pay enough to justify my investment, and what has value in the world. And part of my journey as an editor took me from being the literary scout, and I worked for a very small agency. There were 4 of us. And our client, we were paid by foreign publishers who were asking us to keep an eye on the market, to then being part of Penguin, well, it was just random at the time. So big corporation owned by a German family, and then to Penguin, which was a mid-sized publisher owned by a private equity firm, who then sold them to sort of bad people, who then merged them, and now they're part of HarperCollins. So as a seller and as someone who's producing literary content, it's sort of important to know what's happened in the marketplace, which means there were independent publishers that were subsidized by their educational publishing arms, which Houghton and Harcourt both were, which allowed them to take literary risks. That all in the 20 plus years I've worked in the industry, this all happened in the last 12 to 15 years. Those buyers don't exist anymore. We have just a very small handful, Grove Atlantic maybe, of like independent, mid-sized publishers. And then you have the very small, who publish well but tend to pay smaller advances, and then you have the very, very big. So we have 5 big publishers left. Anyway, I went from Houghton, and then I went to Simon & Schuster, which was held by Viacom, so publicly traded company. I'm saying all of this because it's important to know that every publisher has its own identity, its own culture, and actually you always want to follow the money. Who made this place? What are their values? How are they operating? Like with what kind of intention? That's actually part of the story of, I'm a writer, I have a voice, I want to get my voice out there, who can hold and value that voice? So that's a really important piece of how you think about, who do I query? Or do I query an agent? As I said, I make money, so I need to sort of believe, from permission, so I really have to believe I can sell this book for X amount. Or even if I don't, I like it enough that I can make almost no money. Because that's part of the mission piece of what I do. But sometimes it isn't really the right place. A literary agent isn't necessarily your starting place. A literary agent can be step 2 or 3 once you have a book or 2 in the world, and you're kind of more ready for a more mainstream space because you already have enough of a platform that the agent knows what to do, or you've written a certain kind of book that is just going to be best served. It's a book of poetry. It's going to be better served by a smaller place that really cares about poetry and doesn't look at the numbers as determinative of what has value. Whereas in the bigger corporate spaces, there is really very little difference now between how well you sold and how you were valued. Okay, so that's my spiel. Have I answered enough what an agent does? I work with my authors to shape their manuscripts ahead of publication. If it's a nonfiction project, I work on a book proposal with them, and I take what you have given me and try and frame it in a way that I think editors and publishers will be excited about it and know how to think about it and know how to think about selling it, and give them all the tools that they need if an editor falls in love with it, all of the language. What does this look like? And what are the sales potential that they can use to then go to their bosses and sales and marketing and publicity? That's another thing that's changed a lot in the industry. It used to be an editor could take more of a chance. It came from a gut feeling. Now we have all kinds of numbers that say, well, this book that you're comparing it to sold this many, so your book is never going to do more than that. I mean, really ridiculous determinative thinking about literature. But we also have decisions by committee much more. So publicity and marketing are also going to weigh in and say what they think of something, which I think is too bad. Okay, so I advocate for the author. I sell the author's book. Once I've sold the book, I kind of step out of the way and let the author and the editor develop a relationship and work on the editorial process together. And then I usually come back in about 6 months ahead of publication. And publication is usually 12 to 18 to 24 months after I've sold the book, building in an 6 to 12 month kind of editorial process. And then once the book is finished and ready and goes into copy editing, it's usually still 12 months out to publication. Because the publicity and sales and all of these people, like the cycle is really long and slow, and people need a lot of time to set up a project. So I step in 6 months ahead to weigh in about the cover, especially if this is one of the most fraught places where people aren't happy with their covers, but the publisher sees it as a really important marketing tool. And so I try to mediate that, right? Advocate for the author, but also explain to the author what is a reasonable thing to be upset about and what's an unreasonable thing to be upset about. What can you reasonably change in this process? What's going to serve you well? Because if you piss off your publisher, they're just not going to do anything for you. So it's delicate. And then I kind of assist in the publicity and marketing kind of conversations, and also can evaluate, do we think they're doing right? Do we need to bring in a freelance publicist? I'm just kind of there as the author's advocate, translating in a way between the two parties. What does the publisher want and need and why? And what do I think we can reasonably push back on? And what is the fight not worth having? And then if it doesn't work out with the publisher, kind of strategizing next steps and really thinking big picture over somebody's career. Okay, so now that you know what an agent does, this is all in your handout, so you have notes already. But how do you figure out how to find an agent? Where do you start? I always say do your homework, which is really, and I feel like the starting place is like, who are you as a writer? Who are you trying to get to as a writer? Whose work are you in conversation with? Who inspired you? Whose books do you want to see or sing alongside? That is always like, that's the starting place, and I feel like the clearer you are about who you are, the easier it's going to be to find. I know as an agent, when somebody approaches me and they're very clear, I'm like, oh, they're ready. They're ready because they're giving me the tools that I need to think about this book and know where to put it. And again, I bring all the agenting stuff of like taking that to a different level, but I still want to see that baseline place. So when I say do your homework, it really is thinking through those questions. Who do I want to be as a writer? Who am I in conversation with? Whose books do I see mine sitting alongside? And then that will point you towards who are the people who are involved in helping those books come into the world. And publishersmarketplace.com, you can get a 3-month subscription for a pretty reasonable amount of money. It's an incredible place to research, because you can put in any book and any author and any agent and kind of see what all of their deals have been. Also, just looking on your bookshelf and looking in the acknowledgements, you can pretty much figure out who the publishing team was that was part of that project. So putting together a short list from there, you're going to have much more success if you start out with a pretty targeted list. What never works is dear agent, dear sir madam, and here let me tell you about me. I want to know that you know who I am before you approach me, because it, again, is part of me sensing that you're ready for an agent because you've kind of done your homework and you know who you are and then you know who I am and why we might actually have some affinity. So there are agents whose lists are more romance, there are agents whose lists are more thriller, there are agents whose lists are more literary. And really knowing what that agent is representing is going to help you land in the right place. So yeah, explain your choice. Agents like to feel chosen. It really does work. It's not just flattery. It's, again, for me, a sense of you know who you are and you know who I am. You've done your homework. I'm more likely to pay attention to you. This is a mistake writers make a lot. Don't bury your lead. So a lot of times it's dear agent and then, or dear Anjali, let me tell you all about me. And then kind of in the bottom of the third paragraph, it's like, oh, and I see my book as this, this, and this. That's really where you want to start. You want to start with dear Anjali, and then you want to say, I'm querying you because, and not, I know you like literary fiction, because that's really generic. Like, I'm querying you because I read this book of yours, or I see that you really like books that are literary and political, books that are international, whatever it is that actually feels like it speaks to me. And you can find interviews with the people you're interested in, often. You can find places that they have sort of articulated their interests and what draws them to projects. But then the next sentence after that is your pitch. It's your one-line pitch. And for me, the lead is, I see my book as sitting alongside these books, or I see my book as, I always quote this book. I didn't take this project on, although I became friends with the writer, but I loved her query letter so much. She said if Salman Rushdie and Barbara Kingsolver had a love child, that would be my book.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's breaking a lot of the rules because you're like, citing sort of legends, but it told me what she was. It told me that there was like a political conscience. It told me that there was this Indian element. It told me that it was voicey. It just told me a lot in a really simple way. It can't be maybe the only thing that you say, but you want to say something right off the bat that helps you know what this book is, and also the underlying sort of meaning behind comparison titles for us is who are your readers going to be? When you cite those comparison titles, it shouldn't be sort of subjectively, my book is set in on the seashore, just like so-and-so's book. What you want to say is the vibe of my book is capturing the vibe of these other writers' work. The externals don't have to be the same at all. It's more, I'm pitching my book towards people who are interested in these kinds of things. So sales doc. This pitch letter is really a sales tool. And I know it's really hard to go from creating something beautiful, literary, and personal to now I have to be my own salesperson, but it really does require putting on a slightly different hat. And if you notice, if you go to a bookstore, I really highly recommend you spend some time, once you've come up with your short list of what are your books like, what are they sitting alongside, read that copy. It's the editorial description on Amazon, or it's the flap on the book, or the back ad on the paperback. Read that copy, because that is literally sales copy. It's telling you what the book is, but it's also trying to pique your curiosity. It's not telling you too much. That copy is usually not more than 250 words max, but 150 words is kind of what you want to aim for. How do you describe your book in a way that helps me understand in the most granular, but also broad way what it is, and then give me a reason to go on this journey. Because as you'll notice, they never tell you the whole story. They just seed a little bit of curiosity, because that copy is there to make you spend $25 on a hardcover. I mean, when you think about what you have to do, the ask for you all looking for an agent is, I'm super, super busy, I have almost no time, you're giving me something that makes me think, oh, I want to put aside everything else I have to do, and I want to make this a priority. I want to spend time reading this, and then, not only do I have to read it, I have to give all my time on spec, and I have to develop a whole new relationship with someone. That's a big ask, right? So you really have to convince me in this letter that it's just gonna be something I can't quite resist wanting to do. So I think one of the big mistakes I see writers make a lot is saying too much in the pitch about the plot. Don't tell me the whole story. And I know the rules are slightly different for literary fiction and commercial fiction. Some agents really at this point ask for synopses. I think you have to actually pay a lot of attention to the website of whoever you're querying and follow the rules for them. I don't want to see a synopsis. I want to read the book, but I want you to make me want to read the book. But On the more commercial spaces, for sure, and I think even maybe more, because there's such a, what do I even mean when I say commercial? Commercial used to mean a book that's very plot driven. Commercial books are books that are page turners. Literary books are books that are, the characters go through some kind of internal transformation. That's the like broad understanding of how we think about it when we say literary versus commercial. But actually, as we've become more and more market driven as an industry, I feel like the gold is something that's pitched as literary, where the writing is beautiful, the writer is maybe a poet, but then it's got this page-turning plot to it. And if it doesn't have that page-turning book club kind of plot, it's probably not going to land in at a big five at this point. I'm trying to, obviously, to always, it's not true for everyone, right? There's always exceptions to the rule. Atosa Mosfeg, his name I can't pronounce, is maybe an example, but it's like what she's doing is so clear in terms of a pitch, right? So if it's not this little page-turning thing, then it's very clear. There's kind of a one-line way to talk about what this book is and what it's saying and what it's doing. So another big piece of selling in our industry is we have to say my book is like these books and these books, but it's also new and different in this way. So they always want to know what the comparison is. I guess a good example is a book that I sold a few years ago called Feeding Ghosts. It's a graphic novel. It's very literary though. It was for grown-ups. And I said it was Persepolis, so graphic novel was coming of age story, meets Wild Swans, which was a huge bestseller in the 80s that was about 3 generations of Chinese women. It was kind of the first book that did what it did. And I think that's still exactly what that book is. It's Persepolis meets Wild Swans, even if not everyone remembers Wild Swans. So, but new and different in these ways. Okay. So for this pitch practice that you're all doing, right? Try to describe your book in 150 words and really go and read another book's editorial description to kind of get a sense of what that needs to sound like. The stakes. Okay, now this is a tall order, but ideally your letter is going to establish, and this is, I'm really mostly speaking about literary fiction when I say this. Why should we go on this journey with you? Why is it important to the characters? Why was it important to you to write the story? That isn't always explicitly stated when people say this is what a pitch letter should say and do, but for me, I like to see that at the end. Like, if you can clearly articulate why something mattered a lot to you, why you spent years and years and years writing the story and want other people to read it, I feel like that is a sales tool for me. That helps me know, okay, if you can tell me why you cared about it, you can help me know why I should care about it. And I do remember going to an MFA program a few years ago and asking a lot of these third-year students, why did you write this book? And they didn't know. And I was like, how do you not know? Why did you spend all this time on the story? What are you trying to say? You should know what you're trying to say. Even if it's, I just want people to have a great beach read. That's also a reason. Why do we need this book in the world? Okay, comparison titles I touched on a little bit already, which is, I do think people often get caught up in thinking that comparison title is something that's very externally similar, or when the plot is similar. And really, you have to think about it as, I like to read these writers, and I wrote my book for the same kinds of people who are reading these writers. That's how you come up with the comparison titles. And ideally, in the last 3 years, it is okay to write a book, like there was a recent Pakistani retelling of, I think it was Pride and Prejudice, right? It's okay to say that. I am modernizing or setting in a different culture a classic title. That is a good sales tool or sales hook. But in general, you want to also establish in that letter that I'm a consumer of literary fiction that has been recently published. That means I am in conversation with whatever's out there in the world that is actually being sold to people now. Okay, platform. So the answer is different for fiction and nonfiction, and I'm just going to assume most of the people here are fiction writers, and then if nonfiction writers want to ask me other questions. But for fiction, when I say platform, it isn't about Instagram followers. It is about how connected are you to a literary community? Do you have people who are going to blurb your book? Booksellers that you know? Have you been to any of the residencies like McDowell or Yaddo or doesn't have to be like the most prestigious ones, but what are you doing to kind of be in conversation with other writers and also find your community? Because those are the people who are going to be blurbing your book, but also, communicating about your book and turning out for any book events that you do. And I think there is a big difference between what's a book that's going to be published on a big 5 list with very actual little support from the publisher, because they're betting really big at this point. They pay $1 million and they put all their eggs in one basket. Everyone else is out there fending for themselves. Or should you be at a tin house or a smaller list where you might not get a huge advance, but you're probably going to get a lot more hand-holding. And that might be a better place to start. Okay, before you write to an agent, make sure the manuscript is ready. This is another mistake people make sometimes. They're like, hi, I just wonder if you're interested. Would you be interested? It's like, I don't know. But if you've written a letter and then I write you back and say, can I see the manuscript? And you're like, oh, it's not ready yet. That is, you just lost your moment with me. Don't query me until when I write you back and say, yes, I'd love to see it. You're like, here you go. Now, things can change. Okay, so I requested it and then you haven't heard from me for 6 months. We are now in conversation because I requested it. So you're allowed to poke me gently every 4 to 6 to 8 weeks. You're also allowed to say in that time, oh, I got this residency, I just wanted you to know, or like give me a little, updates that you think might remind me, because I really truly just put it over here. I'm like dealing with my day-to-day, and so a reason to kind of remember, oh yeah, I was interested in this is actually helpful. Oh, you know what? One of my mentors read this, and I went through a really major revision. Would it be okay if I came back to you in 2 months? Or here is a new draft, if you haven't looked yet. That's actually all okay with me. Somebody recently just told me that, and she was like, so do you want the new draft? And I was like, yes, because I don't want to read the last draft that you're not that happy with. Why would I want that? So I do actually want to read the thing that you feel done with, and another big mistake, I'm sure none of you would do this, is I just finished this, my mother loves it. I want to know who else has read it. I want to know that you've taken it as far as you possibly can. We probably are going to go through an editorial process together before I even send it out, because I kind of get one shot when I send it out in the market. Meaning, especially with conglomeratization, there are many different editors and many different imprints. However, they do talk to each other, and there's a huge lemming thing that happens. So it's like, oh, you send it to these 2 other editors and they don't want it, now it's much less interesting to me. So there's an all or nothing kind of thing that happens, but also once I've sent it to one editor, one publishing house, and they turned it down, I cannot go to one of their colleagues. It's done. Unless I have a whole new story to tell. This is a whole new draft, it's been a year, this is why it's so much better, this is why your colleague passed, or that colleague left, so now you can start over. Okay, follow the agency's rules for submitting the manuscript. Once you have figured out who you're going to submit to, really, really, really stalk the agent, stalk the agency, and also follow the rules. Because if we're getting into a relationship, like having a new client for me is a little bit like getting married. Now I have to carry your career, I have to care about everything going on in your life, I have to read your book multiple times without being paid. Like, I have to really want to be in this. And I'm just like dating, right? Like, you can be late to the first date, and I don't know, are you always late? So with I want to know that you're like a clear, open communicator, and if you kind of lose my trust early on, I'm just not going to invest. So one of those things is actually reading. On my website, how I like to receive queries, I like the first 5 pages in the body. Lots of people will just query me, and then there's like a letter attachment, and I'm like, why are you doing that? You didn't read. Okay. And finally, a note about agent etiquette. Okay, so if you've queried someone and they haven't responded at all, you're not really in a relationship and you don't owe them anything. However, everyone's super overworked. So if it's somebody that you actually think you would like to work with and something starts to happen, you can query them again and say, I sent in this query, I don't know if you saw it or not, it was 3 months ago, but now I'm getting some requests for the manuscript, I just wanted to make sure you've seen it. Or sometimes I get that when I haven't even requested it, and they're like, I have an offer, and I'm like, good for you. But it's okay, I'd still rather you over-communicate in a respectful way. What I hate is, I requested the manuscript, months have gone by, I haven't heard from you, and then you're like, I just got an offer for rep, and I took it. It's okay to say I got an offer of rep, and I'm actually inclined to take it, I want to see where you were at. Or I got an offer of rep, and I'm giving everyone 2 weeks to so, now you've given me a reason that I have to pay attention, and we have to do the same thing with editors, right? I have no leverage until I get that one editor like, I like this, and maybe other reads, and they sometimes don't even tell you when that's happening. A friend of mine uses tracking software, so he knows when the editor has opened the manuscript, and then knows when the editor has sent it to colleagues and who's opened it. But that's so complicated. But anyway, it helps me a lot, because then I have the leverage to go back to other people and say, oh, somebody's interested, now is the time to pay attention, because everyone truly is overworked, and that's part of I really can't wait till we start using AI to read our submissions. But that's part of like the corporatization of the whole thing, right? Which is now one editor has a third of an assistant, and that third of an assistant is assisting 3 editors while also trying to advance their own career. It's just there just isn't a lot of time. There's not a lot of time for something care and attention that I think this work requires. And I sort of have a bee in my bonnet too about corporate agencies. Like, one of the things I like about being an agent is I'm my own boss, and I work in a really small space, and I get to do what's important to me and decide how much time I want to give to things. But I feel like if you're a corporate agent, you're paid a salary, and you have to do things at a certain volume to earn back that salary for the agency, and also your assistant and your overhead. And I'm like, how could you actually do this job and give authors what they need if that's the bottom line? A lot of the corporate agencies are connected to big media companies, so they're also, those agents are given like celebrities, and that's sort of how they do it. But that's not the kind of publishing I'm interested in, if you couldn't tell. And then at the back end, I have, and how are we doing for time? Okay, and then at the end I have sort of a list of, okay, so you get to the place where an agent expresses interest in representing you. I think it's really important to remember that everyone says, oh, it's so hard to get an agent, which it is. And at the same time, it is a really important relationship. It's both personal and professional. And you want to feel really good about that relationship. So just because somebody offers you a rep doesn't mean you have to jump at it. And you certainly shouldn't feel like they're doing you a favor. Because sometimes that's how publishing acts, right? You're just lucky to be here. We're all doing you a favor by paying attention to you. I think we need you, writers. I would not have a job if there weren't people out there creating every day. And I think it's really important to remember that. And I think you should trust that if one agent likes your project but it doesn't feel right, there's a good chance you'll find somebody to like your book you actually really want to work with. But how you figure that out is, I think listen to your gut, but also feel free to ask them really hard questions like, why did you respond to this? What do you like about it? What would the editorial process be? How do you communicate, with your clients? Do you text with them? Do you respond to emails? Will I get you or will I get an assistant? Like, actually asking them, because it's sort of, that's the only time you have leverage, right? At the beginning of a relationship, asking them all the hard questions. And if they seem like they don't want to answer them, that's already an answer for you. Because, you don't want to be ghosted by your agent. So, that's a weird note to end on. Maybe you guys can ask me some questions.
Thank you, Anjali, that was amazing. Thanks for all your attention. So just given time, because we want to give you time to work on your pitches in this space, we will take a few questions right now. If the questions can be kind of general and applicable to this process and everyone, as well as toward the book pitches that you're about to craft, that's appreciated. If you have a question about a specific project, I'd encourage you to take that into the local author consults. And also, when we circle back, we may have time for some more questions as well. So is there a question of that nature? Jesse?
Thank you so much. My work, I find oftentimes, is between genres, but also between reading levels. And I see that as a strength, and I've tried to position it that way in query letters. Should I not be?
Are you writing into the kids' book space when you say reading
at
levels?
times, yeah. Like, is it young adult? Is it mid-grade? Is it, yeah.
Okay, so the question is like, I'm writing outside of a really easily defined genre, and I'm writing sometimes in between reading levels or age groups. Because in publishing, when we say middle grade, we usually mean readers 8 to 12, and that usually means that there's a main character who's in that age range. And for young adults, it's 12 and up, although 14 can be older middle grade, everything's a little bit. But the kids' book space is really weirdly rigid about that stuff. And it's really hard to publish a book in the adult space with a young main character, even though we all read Persepolis and Harper Lee, right? Like, these are the books that have really worked, but we didn't have a young adult world. I always say you just have to find another book that's done it, or done something similar. It's like helping them think through, oh, it has actually worked before. It's like giving them a tool. That's my best piece of advice.
Thank you.
And in general, YA is it's a hard category because young people are on their phones a lot more. So they tend to lose, the industry tends to lose readers after middle grade. Where middle grade is still being pushed a lot in schools and libraries, and those school and library market is also a much bigger part of how the kids book world works. But one nice thing with the kids book world is there's like a really long tail. When a book works, sometimes it works for 50 years. And that happens in the adult space, but not as much. Like in the adult space, you have a 3-month window where your publisher might be paying attention to you. But again, your publicist who used to work on 2 books is now working on 4, and they're being ghosted by the media because there's fewer people there and fewer books coverage. So publishing, I mean, it's always going through a weird time, but like with TikTok and the rise of influencers, publishing is really struggling because they used to be able to have a lot more say in how to position a book and what might work. And now there's a lot of reacting. Other people are deciding for them, and then they sort of have to just print. Anyway, if you have specific, like we could talk later if you
No,
want.
that's great, thank you.
I saw Lindsay here too. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, I know you mentioned fiction platforming, but could you just quickly mention memoir and nonfiction as somebody who is actively looking for that?
Okay, so I don't actually do a lot of narrative nonfiction, but the way you sell any kind of nonfiction and memoir is why me, why now, why this book? And that's what a book proposal kind of does. It's a really important sales tool. So even for a memoir, I often have people, even if the memoir is written, I'm like, go back and do a book proposal. Because with fiction, we don't have that advantage of saying, why me, why now, why this book? Although I often have my writers write an artist statement, kind of an essay alongside the novel that positions it and it introduces the writer a little bit, because I found that's a really useful tool, and I like that for book proposals too. So for nonfiction, straight up nonfiction, it has to be what makes you an expert in this field. For memoir, obviously you are the expert because it was your life. But memoir is probably one of the hardest categories to sell right now because all the publishers want is someone with a huge platform. So if you're a very established literary writer, you might be able to publish a memoir, and if you're a celebrity, you might be able to publish a memoir, and almost, like in between, there's very, very little, at least in the bigger spaces. But university presses are doing a lot of really good literary fiction, like they're stepping up to fill in that space that we've lost in the market. And then we have, so I feel like always start local, right? Like that's where everything starts. Find the spaces that are interested in what you're interested in, and if you're a story, I'm just saying, if it's a Rhode Island story, maybe there is a small press here that's actually going to be really interested in that, and also know how to connect with the readers.
In the back there, yeah.
Kind of thinking about the size of press that one is targeting with a piece of work. I'm wondering, reading between the lines, I feel like you sort of suggested that if somebody is interested in a smaller press, feels that their book may be more of a niche book, that they might be better querying the publisher directly rather than an agent.
Yes.
And, okay, so if I can just follow up on quickly, if somebody does that, are they
Yeah.
sort of burning a bridge with getting more formal representation later?
Yeah. Okay, so if you query a small press directly, have you burned a bridge in terms of getting an agent? No. Or you can do some simultaneous, like here are the 5 agents. Like start small, right? Like start with 3 or 5, and then if you're not getting even an interest in the letter, then maybe that's a message to you that you need to change your letter, right? Something's not landing, and if you're getting requests but not responses, maybe it's time to keep working on the book. You can always, and this is expensive, but hiring a freelance editor can also be a really nice move. Like what happens when you get stuck? You could query 3 agents and 3 publishers, and then once you get interest from a publisher, if you do from a small press, just don't accept it. Just say thank you, this is wonderful, and then go back to the agents and book them. You can get an agent, no problem, once you have a book deal. It's so easy. But you don't also have to go that way, right? So you get an offer from a small press, you might trust that press and don't sign the contract, even if you trust them, but you might trust them. And then I always say get help with the contract. So if you can't get an agent or it doesn't feel worth it, even though I do actually think agents are worth the 15%, you can join the Authors Guild for $150 and they have free legal representation and they will, well, free, you pay for $150, but they will review your contract for you and give you good advice. But yes, definitely never sign a contract without having another set of eyes on it because the publishers are not there to take care of you. They are really looking out for themselves. But you can also get good legal advice through the Authors Guild, or you could hire an intellectual property publishing lawyer, and you just pay them a one-time fee to review the contract. And even if it's your entire advance, I still think it's worth it because these contracts are term of copyright. They're 40-year contracts unless the book goes out of print, and then you can take your rights back. So you definitely want to make sure. And there are little things you can ask for. You can ask for like a ton more free books if they're not paying you any money, you know? Or what we call escalators, right? Like you can get a slightly higher percentage if they sell 3,000 copies, and then if they sell 10,000 copies. Different publishers do it differently. And what's the difference between royalties based on net returns, which is basically what the publisher gets, versus royalties based on list price, which is what it says on the back of the book. Like all of those things are not things that you're expected to know, but are really worth like negotiating. And also the other really important clause in a contract is the out-of-print clause. At what stage do you get to take your rights back? Is it when they sell fewer than 250 copies in a year or 2 years, or is it when they sell fewer than 50, right? Like that number is really different at a big press than it would be at a small press. And you want to be able to get your rights back if they're not doing right. Or you don't want your book to be considered in print if it's just on print on demand. I mean, that's not great for you.
Actually, I think we're going to
Run out
we're
of
gonna
time.
pause there. Yeah, but again, the local author consults are a great place to ask questions. Anjali will be available as well during this time. We'll get that figured out for you. And also we will circle back at the end when we do our pitches with Anjali's feedback to get more. But those were awesome questions. Thank you so much for those questions. And we just want to give you time to work on the pitches in the space.